Hi, welcome back to my channel. My name is Isabel. I am still sick, that's why there was no video last week, and you're going to have to endure my horrible voice right now. A little bit husky, you might like that. Today we're talking about lessons in chemistry and women in academia, but mostly lessons in chemistry, as this novel really shows that those issues are not only in one field. They don't happen only in academia, they don't happen only in STEM, and they definitely didn't only happen in 1960s. This year, Bonnie Garmus gave us a amazing layered novel, which I am shocked that this is her debut novel because it really has everything. Our protagonist, Elizabeth Sott, is a promising chemist in the late 50s, early 1960s. As a woman, and as a particularly attractive one, that it really doesn't matter, but it is a factor, she attracts a lot of hatred from everyone. She experiences all of this misogynistic, patriarchal attacks left and right, like from men in her field who are obviously aware of her natural superiority and they feel like they had to turn her down. And also from women, as she is the only female scientist that works in this lab. Every other female is a secretary, so everyone is trying to put her in her place, including the females who feel that Elizabeth Sott represents this disruptive going against the norms that they clung to because internalized misogyny is a thing, as we have learned. This resentment becomes even stronger and inclusively dangerous when she meets Calvin Evans. Calvin Evans is her perfect match intellectually, emotionally, sexually. They just have this deep connection and he understands her in a deeper level. They start a relationship that sparks a lot of hatred because, of course, he is the Nobel Prize winner and he is brilliant and she is brilliant. And it just shows the darkest, most deep insecurities from everyone else, how they all hate on this relationship. And of course, Evans was too good to be true, so we lose him pretty early on. Elizabeth then ends up being a single mother without a job, without money, and grieving the loss of her perfect match. The brilliant chemist ends up having to have her work plagiarized, to have to help those coworkers that previously had insulted her and now need her for petty cash to keep up her toddler alive, until an opportunity comes up as host of a cooking TV show, which you feel that's super random. But cooking and chemistry, demonstrated by Sott, have a lot of things in common. In this way, Elizabeth finds an outlet to speak to a greater group of women, of housewives, and sending them specific messages as you matter and you are important, and what you do also matters and is important, which is a conversation that we still have today, as how invisible home labor is seen as less appreciated and less important because it doesn't contribute to an economic factor. But if you were to hire someone to do this labor for you, you would realize that probably most of us cannot afford that. But when a woman is doing this labor, it's seen as unimportant because that's what she is there for. And this is not just an issue from 1960s, as I said, this is an issue that we still have. And through this cooking show, Elizabeth Sott can show and talk to millions of housewives, and they open up their minds to, okay, if I am important, what I think is also important. So what do I think? It's not that they just absorb her ideas or just want to be like her. It's that they desire to be someone beyond who they've been told they have to. And what I think this book really does amazingly is the balance and the right conversation of, it's not that don't have to be a housewife, which sounds very radical and sounds as disregarding a certain amount of the population who do like their life and who would like to do this. Elizabeth just says you are allowed to want something else without disregarding home labor, without disregarding motherhood, as she is a mother as well. She just opens up their possibilities to get more educated, to start a business, to just demand the amount of respect that they deserve, and to pride themselves also with that honest work that they do at the house. Cooking a meal, doing the laundry, cleaning a space to you for you to create a home, to make livable spaces, not just the place that you go back to and sleep, but a place that you enjoy living in. That is also something that I felt was lacking in the novel, but it's just that I am more inclined to the term homemakers instead of housewives, because housewife, the word house is just, a house is a building, a home could be anything. And the role of a housewife is really that of a homemaker, that person that creates a home. Doesn't even have to be a wife, it can be a husband, it could be a friend. However, because of the contextualize of early 1960s, I understand that lessons in chemistry uses the word housewife because of the context. And if you are interested in that switch in mindset, also from coming up from the 1950s and America's obsession with traditional values and the role of the homemaker, and then how that turns when we enter the 1960s until late 60s, but before the hippie movement. Even though this is not focusing on that, I think how Lessons of Chemistry does a good job at portraying that moment of change. Now, when I think about my experience reading this novel, because I read this beginning of September, so it's not as fresh in my mind, and I've lost all my notes, so sorry about that if I'm rambling a bit. But it was pretty much a reading that kept me irritated and kept me outraged, and also kept me nodding at a lot of things and highlighting moments of pure female rage, and how it's not even out, we're not even allowed to show it. And the most infuriating moments are those when you realize that even in 2022 we still go through this stuff. It's not even, oh, I'm infuriated because of how this happened in the past, but I am infuriated because it still keeps happening, even though we take a lot of this stuff for granted. We take education for granted. We take opportunities for work for granted. We take living with our partners without being married for granted. And if the overturn of Roe v. versus Wade has shown us anything, is that we cannot take anything for granted, especially if we're women, especially if we are minorities, especially if we are white, wealthy men. But without going too into details of our political climate or historical factors, I want to mention those themes and topics that I thought made this novel very special, because I feel that the advertisement of this novel has been a bit all over the place. They sell it to you as very whimsical and, yes, a feminist empowerment novel. However, there are all of these other elements that really bring together the novel as a way of an expose, and it also as a uplifting moments. Like, as I said, there's a lot of infuriating moments that that's what most people focus on their reviews, but I want to talk about those moments that were wholesome and were special, and what I want to take away from, other than, internalized misogyny from other women or just plain patriarchal misogynistic attacks. First of all, I want to just lay it on the style. I think it starts very dry. And that's not a harsh criticism or anything, because I think the author wanted to establish this type of scientific, academic, fact-based voice, because this is what Elizabeth Sod is. And we also need to remember that because she's the only female and because she is working against so many things, and then we discover a lot of other trauma and assault and all of that, she needs to prove herself to be the best. And that is not something that I interpreted. That is something that is clearly stated, because her job is always at risk. She is not supported by the lab that she works at all. And she doesn't even have her MA because of something that happened that wasn't her fault, but was made seem as her fault. I don't want to spoil anything. But because of all of this, I feel like the beginning of Lessons in Chemistry is a bit dry. But I would say read the first 2 chapters and then you're gonna get into it. Because I pick it up and I wasn't sure about it. So that's just an FYI. But later on, the style kind of morphs into Amy Sherman Palladino-esque, as there's a lot of witty, colorful characters, and the voices are very distinctive, they're very strong, and we see these people as fully fledged people even if they're not main characters. Calvin Evans feels like an extraordinary real man. Friends that come along, all of these characters have very distinctive, colorful voices that I feel like are very worthy of our time. But the most colorful, the most whimsical, and the most important is the damn dog. I'm not gonna give you the name of the dog because I want you to discover it on your own. But this dog is not like the others. This dog has thoughts. We have moments that are entirely focalized through the dog. For example, Calvin Evans' death comes through the dog. A lot of Elizabeth's moments as a mother that is stressed out without a job come through the dog. Most important moments really come through the focalization of the dog and how Elizabeth really treats him as a human being. And that is, I feel like, a wink to, you know, how people say that millennials are adopting dogs as if they were their child. Well, Elizabeth's dog is more like is a child, is an experiment, but it's also her way to firstly become a parent before she even gives birth. So every time I think about Lessons in Chemistry, I have 2 choices. I can focus on the infuriating moments and go into a feminist rant, or I can think about the dog. And I haven't seen any reviews talking about the dog. Like, what the hell? Please, please, please talk about the dog. Pay attention to the dog. He's so cute and so important. Like, I love when novels do that and they focalize us through an inanimate object, a dog, a child. I just love that. I feel like it's difficult to maintain throughout a whole novel, and little snippets are okay. But Lessons in Chemistry knows how to do it, and it knows when it is enough, and we kind of get a rest in between scenes when we go through the dog's perspective, and it's just fabulous. Then there's also the female connection, and as it is advertised as this is a feminist novel because we have a female scientist in the 60s. Yes, sure, that's a big part of it, but it's not only because of that. It is a feminist novel because it shows us the importance of female connection and friendship. It could have been a love story, and there is a love story with Calvin Evans, but Elizabeth could have gotten different love interest or something like that to kind of break through. Okay, do I want to be a scientist, or do I want to sacrifice my career, or whatever, right? But it is not like that. It focuses on motherhood and in friendship and just inspiring other women. Now, I am debating saying the next thing, but I have to. I think Lessons in Chemistry gives us a very important message about religion as well. And how, I mean, I am a non-religious person with a Catholic background. So I align with a lot of things that this book says that for a very religious person might seem skewed or non-objective, but let's think about it in the way that the examples the novel gives us. We have examples of the institutions that religions have, like churches and orphanage, and how they really think in a financial business-like model, and they depend on people not seeing this financial business-like model and those motivations, and to think of them as holy and incapable of lying or incapable of having these evil thoughts. There, on top of that, there's also mention of SA. We need to remember that this is a novel with 2 scientists at the front row. Science really aspires to leave behind those kind of cultural religious prejudice, but however, the novel shows us that that is not the case, because Elizabeth's colleagues who are scientists are also think that women should like belong to the kitchen, even though there's no biological or scientific fact to back up that prejudice. In the same way, religion is presented as well as another tool of domination and another tool of submission for women, as they are not following their religious duties or their commands as what where they belong. Also, Elizabeth's father was a religious doomsday charlatan in some way. He was more like a showman, but he was one of those people who are advertising like the end of the world and what you should do about it, and had this kind of like cult like vibe about him. So I would say open your mind for this conversation about religion. And we do have a character coming in who is, I think, a pastor, a minister. I forget from what religion he is from, but he comes into the picture, comes into the found family that happens towards the end of the novel, and ends up being very open about his inner struggle as a young person that was in the path of becoming a priest, but was also attracted by science, and how he was following this path basically because his father did before him, and how they also felt trapped in this idea that they cannot question church, and you can question science and you should question science. And I'm of the idea that even if you are in a religion and if you find the Buddha on the road, you should kill it, you should question it, you should always be looking for, but what's the catch? Not only in religion, but in what you read. You should be critical about everything you read. Doesn't matter what it is, doesn't matter from where it comes from. And that is something that those tools of domination, as I mentioned before, and of submission try to take away from us. It is not explicitly mentioned in the novel, of course. This is just my own reading and I guess my own advice. But I hope that even if you are a highly religious person, that doesn't steer you away from reading lessons in chemistry. Speaking of science and religion, I want to talk a bit about women in science, in academia, and in TV, because those are kind of like the spheres that Elizabeth goes through. She first has encounters with misogynistic attacks and abuse in grad school, and then in the lab, and then in TV. We see these patterns, we see this type of men, because this more physical attacks come from men, even though the microaggressions also come from women. And we can spot them from a miles away. And we see her reaction changing through the years and through her own empowerment. I think we have to make a different video about women in academia, and please leave me a comment if you want that. But I find it fascinating how lessons in chemistry gives us different industry, gives us different areas with the same woman, and how she is perceived as an enemy, and how she must be put down, she must be put on her place, and how all of these patterns repeat. And if you read this book without noticing that, I guarantee that at the end of it, you're going to be more hyper aware of what happens in your personal life and how those microaggressions are not micro at all. Next to this, there's also the topic of motherhood in the novel, which I find very interesting, because we see Elizabeth struggle, especially because she was grieving when she was pregnant, but also she didn't want to be pregnant. She didn't want to be a mother because she wanted to be a scientist. And of course, in our pampered 2020 view, we would think, well, you can be both. But she was barely able to hold her ground. No one saw her as a scientist. And now she's a mom, and she's a single mom. I think that's why it's interesting, those moments of focalization through the dog, because the dog can really see Elizabeth for who she is, for who she was before motherhood, and how she is applying kind of motherhood as an experiment, which that's what it is. But it's so interesting to see also in the way of she has to have this child there is no way she cannot have it, but it's going to destroy the life that she dreamed about for her. And she still goes through it, and she's still loving, and she still has her reserves, and she's learning, and she's honest about it. And it's refreshing because she's not the only woman in this novel who express how difficult motherhood is, and also how exhausting it is to not be able to talk about it. What I find a bit okay, the book closes with, I guess, a semi happy ending, found family moment of empowerment and all of that. But my next question is the next generation, Elizabeth's daughter, who kind of finds where they come from. They find some, they fill up the gaps of some of Calvin Evans' family, and they discover some more, and it is a happy ending. But I wonder that next generation, that this child Mad, how is she going to grow up with, okay, yes, her mom is a feminist icon, but we see her judging her mom harshly as a kindergarten, and how she masks her intelligence. She acts like she doesn't know how to read because she doesn't want to stand out, and she doesn't want to be abnormal like her mom. And I guess it's very early on to say because she remains a child until the end of the novel, and we don't know what she's gonna grow up to be. And with the parents that she had, it's pretty obvious that she is very smart and she will be capable of achieving great success in any area that she chooses. But I wonder, because she's gonna come to age in the 1970s, I wonder if she will become a second wave feminist, or is she going to be against that because of the struggles that she saw her mom live through, and because of how she's inclined of masking her own intelligence. And I'm a bit sad that we don't get to see more of that. We are very focused on Elizabeth, which is great, but as a mother daughter bond, and how sometimes we are doomed to repeat our parents' steps, or we go totally against what our parents were, as a way of rebellion, or just as a natural instinct to see, well, if my parent went through this, maybe if I go the opposite way, I'll find a different result. I just wish we would have seen that more of like that next generation, because we see how Elizabeth creates a change in adult women who watch her show, but we don't know how her child is going to turn up. I think those are very important points of what I like about Lessons in Chemistry. I was trying to make a bit of a deep dive, but I also don't want to spoil anything because it's a fairly new book. I am excited because I discovered that there's going to be an actual adaptation that is already in the works, which I'm amazed because this is a debut novel, it's new, and there's already an adaptation coming up. So that's promising. Elizabeth Soth is going to be uh, Brie Larson, I think, which, no hate towards her. I think she's a great actress. I love her in Room, and I think she was really good also at Captain Marvel, but I am not a superhero fan people, so I don't know how the character or the adaptation was. But I am a bit worried because, I mean, we will have to see. But the description of Elizabeth Saw, I think, goes more with the lines of Elizabeth Olsen, or at least I was kind of picturing Elizabeth Olsen as Elizabeth Soth, maybe just for the name or for WandaVision because of the 50s style. Who knows? We will see. I think it's going to be a big budget adaptation because it's for Apple TV, which is a service I don't have. So I don't know how I am going to watch that. I'm probably going to get the 7-day trial for that. This is the book recommendation for today. Thank you for your patience and thanks for watching. Keep reading, and when you're not, follow me on all my social media, always linked down below. Leave me a comment as well if you have anything to say about the topics I mentioned, even though if you haven't read the novel, it's totally fine. Or if you have read Lessons in Chemistry, just tell me what you thought about it. You can watch my wrap-up video next week to see how many stars I gave. But I think that from this video, you can already see that I really like this novel. I see you next week. Bye.